Hello, everyone. I'll tell you whether it's live. Okay. He's going to tell when it's live. Why is it go?
It's like live right now. So what is that?
Can you hear the screams and background
Yes.
noise?
Yeah.
Is it like very disturbing or?
No. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. We are live. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Welcome to our podcast, the second one. We are from Force, Foundation of Research in Careers and Education, and I'm Nidhi Gani. Today, I have here with me Dr. Lagnajita Chatterjee. Growing up, I always wanted to know what was going on in everyone's mind and why are we humans like this, why are we like talking in a certain way and why are we behaving in a certain way. Whenever I would go in the bus, I would always, wonder that we are all so different and but yet we are all the same. And but I never knew that I could actually go and study that and have fun while studying those subjects and figure out that that's everywhere. Psychology is everywhere, but back then I didn't even know that studying human behaviors is called psychology. And I counsel a lot of students who are interested in knowing what psychology is, what they want to study, and what different career options rather they have after studying psychology. No more, it is like no more in Belgaum where we would have some outdated arts college and you had no other option but to study engineering and medicine. That's why I'm bringing Lagnajita here, Dr. Lagnajita here. She will shed some light on why she studied psychology and what are the subjects that psychology entails and what different career options we have in psychology. So, welcome, Lagnajita, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I love talking with students about how, like, what can psychology do for them, because I had the same struggles. I didn't know anyone who had studied psychology. I didn't know what was the career that it kind of can lead to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always happy to share information and kind of talk about my experience and maybe a bit about other people my friends who are doing psychology.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Lagnajita is a BS in psychology. She did a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. She did her Master's in Cognitive Science or Cognitive Psychology. And now she also did her PhD in marketing because that's what we'll see how business and marketing are also related, right? And then now, right now, she is an assistant professor in WPI here, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. She's a professor of marketing. She has experience interacting with a lot of students, and she's also published a number of papers based on her research. So let's hear from her. Okay. So, Lagnajita, how did you come to choose psychology? Like, what were your favorite subjects while growing up, and what led you to choose psychology?
So, yeah, that's a very interesting question. I have always thought about why I ended up like deciding to study psychology, because in in school, like 11th, 12th, I ended up studying science. I did the usual physics, chemistry, and everything. But I was like you, I love seeing people. And I think one of the reasons I loved seeing how people interacted, how people kind of became friends, because I changed schools a couple times as a kid. So twice or thrice. And every time it was a new set of people, it was a new dynamics between people, and you had to figure out how to be friends.
Mhm.
So I think that always kind of made me want to know what's going on in everyone's mind. What does everyone think? And I think this is like anyone who is in school, they always feel that. They feel like, how do we make friends? Like, how do we get to know people? And I think that's where my interest started. I had, and then when I was graduating, I did the engineering exams, and I did like the all the entrance exams and stuff. But because everyone convinced me I had to, so I ended up doing that. But then I was like, no, no, that's not for me. So I applied for psychology at a few different places. The place I ended up choosing, the college I ended up choosing was where they had pass and like two options of taking economics and statistics with psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that seemed very interesting because traditionally psychology is relegated to being a very art subject, particularly in India,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not. And
Yeah.
it's you can it needs a lot of like, if you have math skills, that does help you. And so that's why I ended up choosing psychology there. And at the um, undergraduate level, at like in college, what you study is general psychology usually. So you study a bunch of different things. You study things like social psychology, clinical psychology. um, you study just
People also
general,
study
like, yeah, just like
psychology.
general psychology and everything. And um, yeah, and I ended up liking social psychology, and that led to me like going on to study cognitive science and marketing. And yeah.
Mhm. I see. Interesting. So, you would recommend like studying, psychology with economics and statistics because, like the way it blends together, whether it comes to job options or even you trying to utilize psychology, which is science or even arts, but to be
Mhm.
able to tell a story using economics and statistics.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the person might want to do, but I like, if you are like going into marketing, it's a very good thing to have, or marketing, or if you plan to, if a student wants to become a behavioral scientist in a company, all those things, economics, statistics help because you are in business. At the same time, if someone is planning to become a clinical psychologist, it doesn't like add anything extra, but it's always nice having that background. And for me, it has helped. I have friends who have taken economics and statistics and are clinical psychologists. So it's a good combination to have, particularly because I think you get to be involved with the math side of it. Now, that being said, I know a lot of students and a lot of people are not super comfortable with math. Don't think
Mm.
that like if you're not comfortable with math, you don't can't do psychology. Psychology has a lot of stuff, and I'm someone who wasn't comfortable with maths in high school, and I almost took statistics as a challenge, that like, okay, I need to do this, I need to figure this out. So that's why I ended up taking statistics. But psychology is a very broad field, and you
Mhm.
can do a lot of things in it. Clinical psychology is a very traditional path. Other things, like, for example, what I did, becoming a marketing professor, that's a different sort of field.
Mhm.
I have friends who have gone into HR. I have friends who have gone into social work. I know there are professionals who go into like industrial psychology, for example. So it's a very broad field, and
Mhm.
depending on what someone's interest is, what they want to do, they can always find something that works for them.
Got it. Yeah, so when we were talking, you mentioned that you love to read as a child. And tell us like what kind of books or genre you liked to read and how did that, motivate you to take psychology in your bachelor's? Because I'm sure that, when you were giving engineering exams, convincing your parents and yourself that, okay, I'm not going to do engineering, but I want to do psychology and this is what I'm interested in. How was that journey like?
Yeah, so I used to really enjoy reading. I was someone who actually liked libraries a lot. Hard to explain, but I did, and that's where where I first came across books in school. Like I used to we had a British Council library and then some more local libraries, and they had books in psychology. And I enjoyed reading them as a high school. And that was somewhere like, uh, oh, and I was like, oh, you can do this for work too. Like I'm interested in looking around and seeing people, but you can do this for a job. Like you can get a job in this. So
Mm,
that's how I kind of started thinking about it in terms of convincing parents. Uh, I think it was easy convincing my dad. It wasn't so easy convincing my mom, and she was like, "What
mm,
are you going to do? Like when you're an engineer and a doctor, you see 10 people around you who have done something similar, and you know what their lives look like, what their careers look like. But when you're studying psychology and like not only psychology, if you are like if I like I remember I was like I do not want to study clinical psychology, then what, like what's the career?
mm,
And
mm,
it was, I think, like now looking back at that point, I think I was a bit frustrated that I couldn't explain what I wanted to do. But I looking back, I understand it's a scary thing. It was a scary thing for me, it was a scary thing for my parents, like would I
yeah.
be able to get a job? So that was definitely there. And even for
Mhm,
me, for a long time, I really couldn't envision myself, couldn't see myself where I would be, like what are the steps. I knew what the steps I had to take, but I didn't know exactly where they would lead. So I know a lot of times when we see people around us, we are like, okay, they have it all figured out. Honestly, when I was like going through this, it was step by step. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what kind of profession I wanted to be in my
mm,
undergraduate. I knew I wanted to teach, but how
mm.
that would look like, what that would look like was very wasn't totally
Good.
clear.
I
And yeah, it was very blurry. It was very like and it scared me. And I won't like I'm pretty sure as a 20-year-old at that point I was like, what am I doing? Everyone has this cool thing, they know they're doing like internships, they have like campus interviews. I have none of that. And it
mm,
scared my parents too, like what are the next steps. But it worked out, and it works out. Like I have seen people, as I said, like people with psychology degrees doing so many different things and enjoying them all.
absolutely. Yeah, I think when you are 18, you've just come out of your science, and because you've taken science now, it becomes like, okay, now I need to move into science itself.
Yes.
And I think this could be in the late 90s that you're talking about, or early 2000s, right? Where
Yeah.
where you're it's just like you don't know what to do with forget a psychology degree. Anything apart from engineering or medicine is like, okay, this person is going to end jobless now.
Yes,
What
exactly.
yeah. And I know, like it's also scary because I think like because you were from Kolkata, how do you think that also kind of gave you a little bit liberty as to, yeah, psychology is something that I can decide to study? Because like coming from Belgium, psychology or doing arts was for people who, for girls especially, who would be like, okay, they're going to do this and then get married. That was the like
Yeah.
common thought going on. Otherwise, yes, if you want to like be an independent woman, then you have to do engineering and medicine. Did that like did you know that, okay, I can work after psychology? And being in Kolkata probably gave you that, I think, a little bit insight into that, right?
Yeah, I think it was two things. So, in terms of, it was both the city, which had multiple psychology programs even in the early 2000s, and also like I had seen my mother who did her degrees in PhD in history and was a professor of history. So I knew
Okay.
wasn't
Mm.
uh, arts wasn't like a thing that ended in like not having a career at all, getting
Yeah.
married, and like
Mhm.
like I never associated taking arts as not being having an ambition. But
Mhm.
it was, I mean, even then, like doing a degree in history is very different from doing a degree in psychology because
Absolutely.
um, in history, it's a established field. It's a field where people have built careers and people
Yeah.
have developed. You kind of know what people end up doing. So
Mm.
psychology was different in that way because if the idea, and this was in Calcutta also, like if you did psychology, you either had to become a clinical psychologist or, as you said, not have a career, not like particularly
Mm.
for women, it was like almost something you did and then forgot about, got married, or just pursue something else. And that was something that I did. Like I didn't believe that for myself, but it was really
Mm.
difficult to convince other people that I could
Mm.
still do things with that. Being in Calcutta did help though, because we had at that point, like, Calcutta University has one of the oldest psychology programs. So it is a very established program. It is a very well-known program. After Delhi University is another one which is
Mm.
really like, well established. And but they have and we have multiple colleges which offer psychology with various other subjects.
Mm.
So it wasn't difficult applying, but it was difficult kind of knowing that, okay, now studying psychology. What do I do after this?
Mm.
Particularly if I'm not studying clinical psychology, because if you study clinical psychology, there are a couple things you can do. Like there is a progression to it, and you see more clinical psychologists around you rather than people who have gone into other areas of psychology.
Right. And I'm sure, like, just listening to this, I think, like, it took a lot of courage for a 18, 20-year-old girl to make that decision of, this is something, that, okay, the roads that were already taken are the ones you don't
Hmm,
like, but
exactly.
you still want to, study that
Mhm,
particular subject because it interests you. So
mhm,
definitely, like, I'm sure like, yeah, it is very courageous of you to do that, because I was interested in journalism and I did not even bring it up to my parents because I was like, I'm not going to find a job. So why am I even going to fight for
mhm,
this? Right.
mhm.
So yeah, hats off. But okay, so now that we are in psychology, you're studying your 4 years in psychology. What what was your thought process like? Like, did the program meet your expectations and were you studying what you thought you would be studying?
So I think starting out, the program was it gave a general basis in psychology. So you got to know, as I said, got to know just like general things in psychology. You got to know what is social psychology. You got to know like different fields in psychology which might be of interest to you. And that was interesting to me. I think that, and I think some of my training, some of my training kind of like even what I use today comes from that, like
Mhm.
doing my
Mhm.
undergraduate, even it's like basic things. But I think what I really craved in that, and that was why I kind of went into cognitive science, was because I really wanted to take a more interdisciplinary approach. Like I really wanted to know how can psychology like kind of work with everything else around us.
Mhm.
And uh, I like, again, this comes from reading books. Like I was interested in reading books. I saw like topics such as social neuroscience, which is basically you look at people's brain activities and try to figure out if like how does that change based on their social interaction.
Mhm.
So I read about that, and it really interested me. And then things like neural networks, which is really big in like
Right. Yeah.
artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of that has a psychology topic associated with it. So I really wanted that, and I think and it's not. I don't think any undergraduate program can give you that, because it's
Mhm.
very difficult to teach 20-year-olds about so much that's out there when you're just
Mhm.
learning the basics. So I don't fault a program for not having that.
Mhm.
And but that was something that I wanted, and that's why when I was looking, I looked at traditional like social psychology programs, master programs in Calcutta University, Delhi University. But other than that, I was also like, I want to do something different. And
Mhm.
someone told me about the cognitive science program at Allahabad University, and that was one of the first ones in the country.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. This has like so much going on. And that's exactly what I got when I was there. I got to study things like um, as social neuroscience. I got to look at just studying things like computer networks, which I couldn't have imagined studying in a more traditional master's psychology master's program.
Mhm. Right, right. You'd think that that's something that I would study in computer science, and
Yes,
not
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
So what was your thesis about in cognitive science?
So I studied, my topic was something related to behavioral economics.
Mhm.
For students who don't know about behavioral economics, it's if you have heard about nudging people, like helping people make little decisions. So what I kind of studied was how people made decisions. So there's a concept in um, economics, like behavioral economics, that people don't make decisions rationally. Like that is,
Mhm.
they use emotions, which we obviously know we do. We don't make decisions thinking A, B, C, let's figure out based on
Mhm.
what's the best thing. We don't make that sort of decision. It's more emotion driven. It's more driven by our own experiences, as you can see with my own like career choices. But what I like, and I think I kind of stumbled into that because I really wanted, as I kept saying, like all
Mhm.
through, one thing remained constant for me was I really wanted to understand social psychology. And
Mhm.
that, as I said, comes from just wanting to know about people and how to get to know people, how do people interact, and how do groups form. So decision making came from that. I wanted to understand what people, how people made decisions, and at that, and what I studied was more related to financial decisions in social context. So,
Mhm.
how does people make decisions, like if they have a lot of social information, if they have like other things than just like uh, the monetary value in front of them, how do they make decisions? And that
Mhm.
was what my thesis was. And that was kind of where I slowly started moving into marketing.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, it's interesting because I think like Zomato recently did played with psychology, or rather, now that we're talking about it, probably I mean they use psychology, right? They had the default settings as you're always going to get cutlery unless you are going to say no, I don't want to get cutlery, and still they were putting a lot of plastic in the environment or in households.
Mhm.
But they went back and changed that the default would be that no cutlery, and if they want to add cutlery they can go and now add. And that's such a small change in those
Yes.
default settings
Mhm.
makes such huge impact. And I think like this is the basis of psychology
Yeah.
psychology everywhere. It's interesting that how like as a child you didn't even know what you wanted to, like you knew what you wanted to study but did not
Mhm.
like exactly have a pathway, but you're thinking about human decisions. And like for your own
Yes.
self, making that decision comes with a that nudge that probably
Yes.
somehow felt
Mhm.
right. And okay, from cognitive science, how so did you enjoy your bachelor's more or master's more? Because I there you were studying more general social psychology, and here you were studying, uh,
Mhm.
like a good.
Yeah, I that's a tough question. I think I enjoyed both, in more both in different ways. Like in terms of my undergraduate, it was like obviously it's college. It's the first time being in college. It's the first time studying what we would see like something that creates our career. So that was exciting. That was so much fun. Just like
Mm-hmm.
learning little things. Like so, we used to study something called figuring out like threshold. So threshold is basically when you can feel the difference between two things. Say you have 2 cups of rice and you keep adding rice to 1 cup and until you can feel the difference between the two. So we used to study those things in undergraduate, and it was so much fun doing that, just like, and doing that in lab, or doing things like figuring out what we remember. Like we used to do tests where we had people read lists of words and see what they remembered. And we used to do it with each other. Like obviously we didn't have participants come in, but we used to do it with each other, and it was really fun. Like the basis of it was fun. Masters, on the other hand, was fun for a different reason. What I said, like it was more interdisciplinary. I was getting to learn so much, and I was getting exposed to so much in terms of what are the possibilities. And honestly, that was where I kind of understood what are the possibilities. Like it was where I kind of was like, oh, this can actually apply to so many different things. You can do so many things. A lot of people have, for example, a friend of mine, she for her PhD went on to study like robotics and like how to train robotic arms and stuff. So there's so much you can do with it, and that's what I learned in a master's, and that's why it was like exciting in that way. I won't say one or the other was more exciting. It was very different experiences.
Awesome, amazing. So then, how did you like decide to go to PhD rather than, you could have tried finding a job, but how did you decide to do PhD, and how did you choose, marketing as a PhD? Because the pattern seems to be like, you're studying something else, now you're like concentrating in a very probably in a area which you may not have been as interested earlier, and now you're going into marketing, which probably is again like very different from what you envisioned to be. And it's amazing because I think like interests change, your priorities change. So tell me about about that. Tell us about it rather.
Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely true. I changed, but like I changed fields like from outside. It seems like I've changed fields multiple times. But as I said, like a lot of my decisions was driven, and it's still driven actually by understanding social situations, understanding uh, things like why do we agree with people. Like there are really amazing experiments out there which basically talks about if you're walking down the street and there are a bunch of people just staring at the sky, you will end up staring at the sky too. It's like a group reaction to the whole thing. And that's something like we see our friends agreeing with things that probably they won't have if like they weren't in a group situation. And I have always been fascinated by that, and I think that has always been the common thread for me, that I want to study something that's about the society, about a social context. And for me it changed how I wanted to study, and I think that's why my choice of fields changed. So I went from being like, okay, I like studying social psychology, to being like, I want to study something that's more interdisciplinary. I want to study something that looks at social behavior from different perspectives. So by the time I got to the end of my master's, I was like, I like studying this, but something that I always missed for any kind of psychology topic was the application of it. How to apply it and where does it apply? And that's where I was I was introduced to marketing. So behavioral decision making is a field which itself is like grounded in both psychology and marketing. So if you look at people in say IIM, for example, a lot of them have some background in psychology, or they have done something related to marketing. So lot of people have both experiences. And when I was applying, when I was deciding, I was like, all right, this seems exciting. This is something where I can apply what I learned. Now that obviously that doesn't mean I was absolutely sure again that
Yeah.
that doubt of like, what am I going to do with this? And am I like crazy to do what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Has persisted for a long time. Like it took me a long time to be like, this worked out. Like it doesn't go away. But I was like, but that was another reason I did end up applying to a few like psychology programs and a few cognitive science programs. I was like, let me at least this time stick with something I'm doing. But marketing worked out, and I think it's an exciting field because what you do here is you ask the question, how can human behavior be like how does it exist in this world of commercial world that we live in? How does it exist in a world where consumerism is so much, and what do we do to make sure that we as customers are safe, our well-being is the concern of businesses? And that's a big question, and
Yeah.
psychology plays a very, very
Yeah.
big role in answering that question. So one of the things that I am studying now and I'm researching now is looking at cryptocurrency and how why people invest in something that's still considered risky. And it's an interesting topic because there are so many reasons we come across, so many things that affect people's decisions in terms of financial investment. To your second question of why academics and not industry, I think there were two things going on there. One was I come from a family of teachers. I come from a family where my mother was a professor of history. My grandfather was a professor of chemistry. So I came from a family where everyone was a teacher, and it, to me, growing up, it always seemed like a very exciting profession.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah. So that was something, that was one of the things. And I always like loved the fact that I could help students learn and be excited about a topic. And I saw my mother do that, and I saw a lot of other people in my family do that. And that was why teaching was something I was really interested in. And I also wanted to stick with research, like learning about topics, learning of having the freedom to kind of explore things that are interesting and fun, sometimes fun. It's really fun studying psychology. And but on the other hand, like on a more practical side, one reason that I didn't, and like when I was graduating with a master's, there wasn't a lot of opportunities if you didn't do a PhD. Again, that question of what do I do with my training? What do I do with, where do I go after this? And that was what it was difficult. I won't say it was impossible, but it was more difficult than it is today, like 10, 12 years
Yeah.
ago. Like it was more difficult to get an industry job than, and I really honestly, I didn't even know what was its industry job I should be
Yeah.
looking for.
What was
Like,
yeah.
yeah, like now there's like, now there are things like user experience. That's a big thing. It's becoming bigger in India.
Yeah.
There are behavioral scientists. You can go into like industrial psychology. So industrial psychology was pretty big before also, but that again, something I didn't want to do. But I didn't even know what industry jobs I should be looking for at that time.
Right. 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 Yeah. I want to address that. Like it's good to like change streams or
Yes.
like change your interest, because it's impossible that you'll have the same interest when you're 18 and when you're 28. It
Yes.
means that you have not really evolved, right? Like things keep changing. And so definitely and I specifically stress on this is because emphasize on this rather is because the students are very much, they're under pressure. Like if I choose something for my bachelor's right now, it's for life. That pressure itself starts to like get to them,
Yeah.
and then choosing a career becomes very difficult, and they end up choosing engineering and medicine because most of the examples you see around are engineering and medicine. But that's why I think it was important to bring you here, like for them to understand it's fine. You loved
Yeah.
to read, you loved to read, and you wanted to keep doing that. And I think that
Mhm.
was a bigger motivator as well, along with seeing how humans make
Yeah.
decisions and behavior,
Hmm.
to take study psychology and be where you are today. And so tell me, okay, from psychology, I think, okay, you have chosen business to go towards business,
Hmm.
but you said that one of your friends went towards robotics. And I'm sure, like, me being from the healthcare industry, I see a lot of psychologists now getting into user experience research of
Yes.
apps for healthcare
Yeah.
as well. It's psychology is everywhere, and there is no, I don't think there's a limit as to what
Yeah.
industry you can get through
Hmm.
with psychology. Can you give us some examples, like what your friends have done, so people know, okay, these are the different options that are available for them?
Definitely. So first of all, I think you made a very good point about changing fields. That's evolving. And as a and like again, as a 20-year-old, I didn't think I would change. I honestly did not think I would change. And even when I was changing, like I changed as like when I was 25, I decided to change my field. When I was 22, I decided to change. And it is always scary. Like that's something that
Mhm.
we do need to acknowledge. It's a scary thing to do, but most often if you do something that makes you happy and makes you like excited, things fall into place. Even if you're
Mhm.
like going from, say, if you're studying engineering and then you decide, no, I'm going to go into like like sound engineering, for example, or music,
Yeah.
it falls into place. So yeah, I think I was scared all through the journey, and there are times I still am very fascinated by the fact that I actually made those decisions. But
Mhm.
those are very important decisions. I think they made me who I am, and I think that's really important. Um, so, coming back to kind of talking about the industry and what you can do actually. So, there are
Mhm.
many ways, like in which psychology can be someone's career. So, for example, clinical psychologist is the most traditional route a lot of students go into taking. A lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues are clinical psychologists. You usually do bachelor's in general psychology and then
Mhm.
get into a master's program where you're specializing in clinical psychology.
Mhm.
After that, you usually do, you slowly become more specialized doing an MPhil and getting a license. So you work towards getting a license. Um, Outside of that, so that's like a more traditional thing that we would have seen around us, like 10 years ago, that was most common. But other than that, if someone is studying psychology,
Mhm.
uh, user experience is a very good
Mhm.
upcoming field where basically what you're, as you said, what you're studying is looking at how people engage with web applications, websites, and it feels a gap where fills a gap where user designers, they design the app, but what people
Mhm.
experience, that's a gap
Mhm. Mhm.
user experience researchers fill.
Mhm.
Other areas, if you study like cognitive psychology, if you're studying, if anyone is studying cognitive psychology, behavioral scientists, particularly, like as I said, I studied behavioral decision making, things like that. You can
Mhm.
go into becoming a behavioral scientist. A lot of companies have behavioral scientists. They are more like consultants
Mhm.
who doesn't focus on apps or website experience. They're more focused on customer experience, like the
Mhm.
broad, how do people engage with this company, how do
Mhm.
people even respond to advertisement, things like that.
Mhm.
Other than that, there are fields like school psychologists. You
Mhm.
can Most schools in India nowadays have a school psychologist, so that is another big upcoming field. In terms of research, so as I said, I did marketing. A friend of mine, she went on to study robotics for a while, and other people have studied more general topics, just cognitive psychology. So there's a broad, a large variety of things you can do. And today, particularly today, and I'm guessing in the next 10 years, this would be even more true, it would be easier to get jobs after masters. It would be easier to find jobs after masters. So not like it is not anymore like you have to do a PhD. You have to do a PhD. There's a lot of masters in social work now, like where you do an undergraduate in psychology, and then you go into doing a master's in social work and then work for a nonprofit organization. That is another field that people go into. So, as I said, there are so many things that you can do. And there are many ways you can use it, many ways you can grow your career, and there are many ways to kind of use the training. So it's not just one path that anyone can go on.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to add, like, it's a field where you can get in at any point. Like if you do a bachelor's in engineering, for example, like, no, I really want to kind of get into psychology. It's possible to get in at different times in your career into psychology in different ways.
Oh wow, that was a very important point to note.
Yeah.
Because many times parents are like, get a safe degree first and then do whatever you want to do. So that's also a good point to note that they do have the option to do that. And psychology is everywhere a human is, I think there is psychology, or animals as well. Or rather, let me say living things, because yesterday I was at MIT at the origami fest and there was this plant psychologist who is like building these models. So I don't think it's limited to animals as well. Yesterday that kind of just like opened my eyes to something else. So I'm like, anything that is living, I think, has psychology. Even in warfare strategies also psychology would come into picture. So anything that you like to do, psychology is the basis of the way you would. And it's interesting that you're like studying consumerism, because for quite some time I think that affected my mental health. The whole consumerism aspect of it affected my mental health. So it's also interesting to note that if you're interested in mental health and well-being of society, it's not necessary that you have to be a clinical psychologist itself and be on the counseling side, but you could be studying like different subjects and topics like you are doing to address those issues as well, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Like,
No, go ahead if you have
No, I said, like, definitely. And like, not just what I'm studying, even if you're doing, like, if you get a certificate in social work after doing a degree in psychology, you will still have options to contribute towards society, like in a different way. So there's many ways to contribute to societal growth if that's something that a student is interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see a lot of not to make it a gender thing, of course, but between like when I counsel girls and boys, I see that a lot of girls are interested in bringing that change and making that impact. But unfortunately, I don't know what happens after a certain period. That fire is gone. But I hope that your field can really inspire them to keep that fire alive. So, LJ, let me ask you, what advice you would have given your younger self, because like looking back, like how your career has panned out and given your thought process back then?
I think one thing I will definitely tell myself is it's going to be okay, that you will figure out, and you're doing something that's more difficult, or I would say more unplanned than a lot of your peers are doing, but you're going to have a fun and exciting career. And obviously, like, not to say like there won't be challenges, but it's going to be okay. So I think that's what I would have told myself, because I was scared. As I said, I was scared about what I was doing. I felt like, why? I can just do an engineering degree. I had did my 12th in like I passed with like physics, chemistry, maths. I can get into an engineering degree, and I did. I did get into one of two. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So, yeah, there. And I think that's something anyone who is choosing a career, anyone who's like graduating from school now, or even in first or second year of their college, it's very important to know that what you choose, even if you don't see the grand picture, it works out. It eventually like works out, and it's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I completely resonate with that. And I also want to, this should have been my last question, but I just want to like ask how, what do you think, like, how's the living situation like, right, for psychologists? Because we have this perception that only engineering and doctors make a lot of money, the rest of them don't live, I guess. So how, like, tell me about your lifestyle, or was it something that you expected it to be, and shed some light?
Yeah, so I think kind of like before actually talking about myself, I think the difference between if you are getting an engineering degree versus if you're getting a psychology degree is
Mhm.
uh, how soon you start working. That truly is a difference. Like you
Mm.
start working with an engineering degree, you can start working after doing your bachelor's. While with psychology, usually you'd end up having to do a master's. And I have seen this difference between me and my friends always.
Mm.
And that being said, like in the long run, it's a good life. Like you get a career, you make a choice, and you're happy doing what you like. So you travel, you have fun, you learn a lot. So it's not just like your life is like you chose something for a good life and then you're not happy with the career. You're happy with the career and you have a good life and you travel. You basically like we obviously all of us have these things which are outside of work or outside of whatever we are learning that we dream or envision of doing, and you get to do those, maybe not as quickly as someone with an engineering degree. I will
Mhm.
give that, like
Yeah.
uh and a lot of my friends who did engineering degrees started working when they were 23 and they have already been working for 10, 12
Mm.
years at this point. I haven't. So it did feel like it sometimes felt bad, but that shouldn't be discouraging because at the end you end up at the same place. You end up with
Mhm.
equally exciting but different opportunities. You end up with equally exciting and fun life, and you live a nice life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think after, earning, say, for 10 years, it you are going to think that, oh, am I going to make more money? It's all,
Yeah,
I think it all boils down to what are my interests? How do I
exactly.
pursue those interests? I think
Exactly.
everybody is just there. And yeah, and LJ lives in downtown Boston. So but yeah. So okay, thanks, LJ. Let me open the floor to any questions students might have. Many times
Yes.
they don't ask here. They, I think they put in some comments, but even
Mhm.
if they don't, they always come back with questions. But yeah, it's time for students to ask any questions on psychology or anything related. Meanwhile, they're probably typing. So let me ask you, what were your favorite subjects when you were growing up?
Uh, like in school or on like
In school,
bachelor's?
sorry, in school.
In school, so I loved studying history, and that was mostly because of my mother. As I said, she was a professor of
Mhm,
history. I did
mhm,
not actually take psychology as a subject in school. Like that did not happen. I read a lot of books, so I loved psychology, not as a
mhm,
subject in school, but just as something that I'm interested in.
mhm,
History was another thing I loved. Um, I the funny thing is I did not enjoy biology in school, but then
mhm.
when I went to study psychology, you study a lot of biology. So you study like neural systems, and I actually started enjoying that so much. I was like, oh, this is what this is like. Like I was missing out on so much.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because
Hmm.
biology, people think biology is about remembering complicated words. And I'm like, what?
Yes.
Like, because I studied biotechnology purely out of interest. I loved biology as a kid, and I loved, so that's why I chose biotechnology. I didn't want to become a doctor because for me, biotechnology was about studying,
Yes.
studying
Mm-hmm.
how human systems work, how those processes work, and um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was never about like complicated words or anything. It just taught me so much about the natural world.
Yeah. I think we have a few questions.
Oh,
There
can you
are,
see them? Because I can't see them. If you can. Oh, we
yes,
can.
I can see one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it
Uh,
says what skills you need to become a psychologist.
okay. I think there's also another question about doing bachelor's in psychology after taking arts. So I'm
Okay.
kind of going to answer both because they are
Oh,
similar. So, uh, what skills do you need to become a psychologist? Honestly, when you are like going from like your class 12 to bachelor's, not a lot. As I said, I haven't taken any classes in psychology in my high school, and usually most colleges do not have requirements beyond just the percentage, like a certain percentage cutoff and stuff like that, to get into psychology. Now, even beyond that, so you study in bachelor's, you study general psychology, and then you choose which field you want to specialize in your master's. And even in that, different universities work differently. I know Delhi University used to have entrance exams for their master's. Uh, Calcutta University did it based on performance in bachelor's. But honestly, if you have general psychology, then you can go into studying a master's in psychology. Now, for cognitive science, which is also kind of studying psychology, and right now, I think a lot of the IITs have those in addition to CBS, which is a part of cognitive Allahabad University, where I did my master's. You really don't need to have a degree in psychology if you want to study cognitive science, at least in India. So they have entrance exams where they ask you very general questions and you answer them based on your field, and that's what the decisions are made in about. So, and eventually, if you're like actually going into a career as a psychologist, it just depends what you're doing. If you're doing, for example, if you're becoming a clinical psychologist, you work towards getting a license. If you are going into social work, you get a certificate or a master's in social work afterwards, or do an MPhil, like do a higher degree in social work. For marketing, honestly, if you're going for an MBA, again, it's a very different process. If you're doing a PhD, it depends on what kind of research you have done in your master's. So as I said, you can get into psychology in many different ways, and it's a very flexible field where you have different points of entry, different ways of getting into it. And as I like to answering the other question about taking arts, you do not need to you can get a BSc in psychology after taking arts if you have taken maths. So in your high school, it might change based on college to college. Some colleges have different requirements, but for me, when I was taking um, deciding my subjects for my college, it was bachelor's. It was The requirement was you had to have taken maths in your undergrad, in your high school. And yeah, you don't need to have a subject in psychology in 11th or 12th. As I said, like I didn't have it. I never studied psychology before starting my bachelor's.
Okay. Yeah. I think just to add to that for the students, you can make it as art related subject as possible. You can make it as science related subject
Yes.
as possible, because psychology is everywhere depending on what you are interested in, right?
So kind of to Nidhi, to your point, most colleges have what is arts and psychology. So that's what you usually do. So
Okay.
you take usually you take some version of geography or political science with psychology, and most colleges let you, like, that's the traditional degree that you have, and BSc in psychology is more uncommon, or at least it used to be like 10 years ago. I don't know what the scenario is right now with bachelor's. So
I
you
see.
can, yeah, so you can do both, as you said. Like, it can be, you do not have to have a strong STEM science background to do this. You can have an arts background and study psychology. Most of my friends have a background in arts and they went on to study psychology.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think few people, somebody messaged me they're not able to ask questions because I'm just seeing, I just saw one question. If you are able to see the others,
I saw two. I saw two questions. The ones I answered.
okay.
I can't see any other question. I mean, I'm happy to answer any other question that's in the
Yeah,
comments, or if you want, you can forward those questions to me. I can answer them also.
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like LG, I met LJ at a party and we just started chatting and now we are like very good friends. So
Yes.
I have access to her all the time. You can send me questions
Exactly.
and I will reach out to her. But you
Yes.
can also send her questions on Instagram. It's the same thing, Lagnajita Chatterjee. So if she
Yeah.
can also like answer
Mhm.
questions. But yeah, if there's anything, I'll like put you in touch with the students again, and maybe we can like do
Yes,
something together.
definitely. Happy to. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook. So if there are questions, feel free to reach out on any of those platforms. I'm happy to answer.
Okay, cool, awesome. All right,
Okay.
thank you, LJ, for your time. I think this was
Mhm.
a very informative session, and thanks
Mhm.
for shedding light on psychology. And hopefully, meet you
Thank you for,
soon.
yes. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm really excited for whichever student, whoever decides to take psychology, because it's an exciting field and we know we need more people in it.
Absolutely, cool. All right,
All
bye.
right. Bye. Take care.